Hello, my name is Wendy and it is time for a reading wrap-up. August was wonderful, phenomenal. I read 15 books. 15! I have not read 15 books in a month in a very long time. And I'm in school, so that's even more shocking. To be fair though, 7 of those were graphic novels / manga, and the other 8 were literature, so maybe cheating, maybe not. It's my channel. I do what I want. Let's get to the August reading wrap up. First book I read was No Light to Land On by Yara Zgheib. This is a gorgeous story about a young Syrian couple, Hadi and Sama, who hope to make something of themselves in America, along with their new bundle of joy. So the story goes back and forth in time. We go back to Sama's mid-pregnancy stage and how Hadi's father suddenly died in Jordan. So Hadi flies back to Jordan in order to attend his father's funeral, but when he comes back to America, he finds himself in an expired visa limbo. With a new political power coming into play, bans on certain countries have Hadi barred from visiting his wife, his son, and his home. So you get both perspectives in this story. You get how Hadi and Sama were completely different individuals before they met each other, and how they grew up, and how they envisioned America to be this beautiful opportunity for them, and how those opinions change as they go along. You also get to see how Hadi and Sama's love is put to the test while Hadi is in Jordan and Sama is alone with their newborn son in America. This was awesome, an immigrant love story like no other. I think a lot of immigrant stories tend to focus on the American dream and how inevitably false it is. And this one is no different in that aspect. It definitely focuses on the idea of America being this hopeful place, but it's unique in the fact that it's set in the eyes of a Syrian couple during what is meant to be Trump's America. You really see this couple going through the motions of their lives both together and individually, while trying to figure out where they can call home. Their home country, which has been terrorized by war, or their new country, which doesn't want anything to do with them. I really love the novel. I think the only criticism I have is the fact that it has a huge bird metaphor, which is part of the title, part of the cover. It's such a big part of Sama's particular story, but it just didn't stick right with me. It wasn't explained well enough, or maybe it was explained too much. I think that it was trying to tie the fact that birds migrate because they need to. Sometimes they don't even have a reason. They do it every year. The author definitely tries to tie that with migrants moving for whatever reason that they need to, but it just didn't go through well enough. The metaphor itself was poetic, but it was over-explained to the point where it felt like it was being forced. But a great novel. 4 stars, absolutely. I listened to the audiobook as well, and I definitely recommend the audiobook. The female voice actor who does the voice of Sama put her whole throat in that performance, so yeah. If you like immigrant stories, if you like love stories, you'd love this one. Next, I read Sayaka Murata's Earthlings, and oh my god. This was super buzzy because of how dark and bizarre and graphic its contents were. I would like to preface this by saying that this is not a book for many people. This is a book for very few people. We follow Natsuki, a girl who is just trying to be normal, but in her heart of hearts knows that she is an alien or a witch, because she's been given this magical mirror that grants her powers thanks to her plushy hedgehog that she carries around everywhere she goes. She spends her summers in Nagano at her grandparents' house and has a really close relationship with her cousin Yu. Both Yu and Natsuki are sort of outsiders in both their family and friend settings, so they really depend on each other's connection. But an incident occurs one summer that drives the two apart, and the two promise to survive no matter what. We fast forward into the future where Natsuki is an adult, she's got a regular paying job, and she is living with her asexual husband, and her family is putting on the pressure to have children, and she wants nothing to do with that. She just wants to live as normal as minimum requires. As the story progresses, you realize that there are demons coming back into Natsuki's life, and the reason why she may have been granted those magical powers. We also get reunited with Yu in horrific and emotional turn of events, and we learn just what happened that summer that separated her and you in the first place. This book is insanely fucked up. I can't rate it because I don't know if the book was well written enough that I was left speechless and pensive, or if it was just shock value after shock value. Every trigger you can think of is in here. Sexual abuse, child abuse, cannibalism, like, it is very graphic, and once it gets graphic, it does not stop. It is chapter after chapter, and you are just clinging on to this book thinking, oh my god, it has to end somewhere. It has to end here, right? It's gonna get better. It doesn't. It really does not. What I did enjoy was the fact that Murata seems to focus on these characters that really don't understand society's perception of normal. She really writes women who just want to be themselves but are forced to fit a mold, and at the end of it they choose, fuck this mold, I'm gonna be myself. However, I don't know if that balanced enough with the amount of bizarre and grotesque stuff that was in here. If you enjoy really unsettling books and you're not put away by certain trigger warnings or all the trigger warnings, then I think you would like it, but I still think it's kind of a stretch. After Earthlings did such severe trauma to my brain, I had to read something that was romancy and lighthearted, so I read Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is about Elsie, a 20-something librarian who is not like other girls. She enjoys books, she doesn't really go to parties, and her best friend is always the one that gets hit on. So yeah, she is not your typical girl. Whatever that means. Anyways, Elsie orders pizza one night and runs into Ben, the rugged softie of her dreams. The two exchange numbers and they go on a few dates, and within a couple weeks they're married. They've eloped. Just a few days after their marriage, Ben gets into a fatal accident that leaves Elsie devastated. At the hospital, while still coming to terms with his death, she meets Ben's mom, Susan, who has no idea who she is or what she meant to Ben. Throughout the story, we see Elsie try to come to terms with her relationship to Ben, her upcoming relationship with Ben's mother, as well as validating your relationship for others rather than yourself. This was really sweet, but it was really corny too. And I know I can handle a level of corny, but this one was just a bit too much. Elsie reads like a 2013 quirky Tumblr girl who is trying to convince everybody that she's just a nerd, that guys don't usually like her, that even though she's got a banging body, it's just not in the cards for her to fall in love. The passages were written in a Wattpad type of way, in the fact that they were kind of either dragged on, really childish, or just too corny for me to even read out loud. Now here's the kicker. It was written in 2013, so of course it's going to read like that. Reid writes mostly commercial fiction from what I understand, and if this is what the mass market wanted, she was gonna give it to them. Let's get into what I did like. I really did enjoy their love story, however cheesy or impractical or unbelievable that it was, because it's a meet cute. It happens. Meet cutes happen all the time. I also really enjoyed Elsie. She starts off as this like meek loser character, and as the chapters go along and she feels the need to validate her relationship to other people, including Ben's mom, she realizes that she doesn't have to do any of that. She had a relationship with Ben that was meaningful to her. Them loving each other for no matter how long was all that mattered to her. Also, the book really wasn't about just Ben and Elsie's relationship to me. To me, it was more about Elsie's relationship to other people, specifically Ben's mom. Each of them claims to know Ben more. Elsie, because Ben admitted a lot of secrets and personal parts of his life that he couldn't tell his mother, and Susan, because she gave birth to him, so why wouldn't she know her own son? The book also illustrates how grief can take over your life for an uncountable amount of time, and how you have to circumnavigate around that when you have a job, friends, family that are looking after you. Again, it was a 3-star read for me. It wasn't bad. It wasn't anything particularly compelling, but I did realize that with this book, you realize how far Reid has come in terms of her literature. She's gotten so much better at writing. I read Daisy Jones and the Six a few years ago, and wow, you can see that she has been through it. She has really grown up as a writer, but that's because 2013 and 2019 are quite a different year to write in, and quite a bit of amount of years to practice. I am worried about The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I don't want it to be commercial fiction, and I really hope I do love it, but we'll see. I think it'll be fine. Apologies for any lighting changes. Daylight is precious now that the sun sets at 7ish. The next book I read was Memorial by Bryan Washington. This is about Mike, a Japanese-American chef, and Benson, a black daycare teacher, and their life living in Houston, Texas. Mike and Benson have reached a standstill in their relationship, meaning they don't know why they're even together anymore. The sex and the amount of years that they've spent together seem to be the only thing holding them up. But before they can have a real discussion about it, Mike finds out that his dad is on his last days and decides to go visit him in Japan to be with him in his final hours. At the same time, Mike's mother, Mitsuko, comes down to visit Mike, only to learn that her son is leaving. Mitsuko decides to stay with Benson in a weird domestic relationship of sorts. Benson and Mitsuko navigate their lives both with each other and without, in a situation that has them grasping for answers from one another. While Mike is trying to figure out what broke off his family in the past and how his life was before Benson, Benson is trying to figure things of his own. He learns more about Mike and himself through Mitsuko and where he wants to take their relationship from here. This was strictly an audiobook listen, and I think that helped the novel a lot, actually. It's written in this straight to the point, choppy sort of prose, meaning there's no real prose to speak of. There's no flowery sentences or anything like that. It's very written. I went to the store, I saw a guy there, this is what happened. And I think that it turned out really well. It made it seem so realistic to me in the fact that I didn't need those flowery sentences or a paragraph of just fluff to get any kind of emotional value from it. You get both Benson and Mike's perspectives, and they're both such unique voices. How they think about each other, how they think about themselves, their dialogue, their actions. It's written in such a masterful way without needing too much. It's also a lot heavier emotionally than I had planned. Because it was written in such a brisk fashion, I imagined that the emotional turmoil would be about the same, but no. I was attached to each of these characters. And the way Washington writes the POC experience, nostalgia, growing up queer in two very ethnically different families, it reads so, for lack of a better word, real. The dialogue I love especially. It's straight to the point, like I said before. There's nothing super poetic about it, and yet there's a beauty in that too. I gave this 4.5 stars just because I feel like it's missing something. Not because I didn't like the ending or I felt like it was cut too abruptly, but because there were some loose ends that I feel could have been answered in like a matter of sentences. Although, to be honest, I can't really figure out what it is that it's missing either. So take that with a grain of salt. It is a phenomenal read. I really want to read Bryan Washington's, I believe, Lot. It's what it's called, his short story collection, after reading this one, because this one was phenomenal. So recommend, absolutely. I followed that up with So Lucky by Nicola Griffith. This is about Mara, a mega girl boss. She is the head of a AIDS foundation that is very wealthy and prestigious. She's this intense martial artist and a proud lesbian. Mara's life changes in an instant when she finds out she's been diagnosed with MS, a fatal disease that takes control of not just the body and the muscles, but the mind as well. With the disease taking its toll on her body, Mara realizes that she can't trust anybody. Not the employer she helped build up, not her estranged family, and definitely not the body that's failing her. She's gone from the volunteering able-bodied to being the person that needs an able body. She sets out on this soul-searching journey that helps her understand why disabled people and sick people are viewed so differently. This was really good. The premise of this was super smart. The whole turning the cards on someone who was once helping out sick people and now they're sick was kind of like both karma and irony. You feel Mara's helplessness throughout the novel. Her why me, I'm healthy, I'm young, I made so much of myself, how dare people look at me differently, don't people know that I'm the head of an organization, like that stuff was both rewarding and hurtful to read. What's also great in this book is the discussion about how disabled people are viewed. They are seen as this burden, this sad sob story, when in reality they have individual dreams, they have passions, they have goals just like anybody else. But Mara really witnesses the fact that people change around you when they find out you're sick or when they find out you're paralyzed, and so on. She talks about how she hates when people call her brave or inspiring. It's not inspiring to be sick. It's not brave to be sick. And she really makes it clear that people are getting off really on just saying their best wishes to you when they know nothing about you. It was really good, but it felt a bit distant. I wanted to be closer to Mara, and I wanted to be closer to the other characters that were mentioned in the novel, but the writer writes in a way that is similar to Washington's, choppy, but in a way that I don't think helped the novel. I think that you are just above what's happening instead of being right there with her. And I think that's a detriment to the novel. I think we could have gotten more emotional value from it if we were just a little bit closer to the characters. It's a 3-star read for me. I think it's a great story. I think it just needs a little more connection to the characters in order to keep the reader hooked and focused. But yeah, it's a great story. A disabled character who's out for vengeance. Who doesn't love that? I also listened to the audiobook Tell Me How to Be by Neel Patel, which was narrated by Vikas Adam, and oh my god, you guys, this was dramatic, sexy, absolutely heartbreaking. This was everything I needed at the time that I read it. We're following Akash, a 20-something Indian man who's living in Los Angeles and is really down on his luck. He's living kind of a lie. He's living with his partner, unbeknownst to his mother, that he's gay. He's an alcoholic. He can't hold a job for very long, and he's very much haunted by the past. We're also following Akash's mother, Renu, a headstrong woman who left a beautiful, fantastic life in London, as well as a lover, in order to fulfill a boring, cyclical life of a traditional housewife in Illinois. Both Akash and Renu live a life of secrecy and guilt as well as shame, and both of them have these feelings due to a relationship they clung on to and had in the past. When Renu decides to sell the house in Illinois, Akash decides to come and visit and help, but also to figure out what went wrong with their family all those years ago. The two of them try to keep cordial and play the mother-son role, but realize that both of their secrets are too much to bear. To quote Lady Gaga, talented, amazing, beautiful, show-stopping, beautifully rendered, absolutely hilarious in some points. This was the novel that I did not expect to blow me away, and absolutely did. Akash is also written to be this character that's so incredibly flawed, to the point where you are yelling at the novel so that he can stop what he's about to do, or not say what he's about to say. And yet you still want him to win. You still want him to thrive, to love, to own up to his mistakes. And Renu, his mother, Renu, my beloved. Renu is many of the moms that Black and brown kids have, forced to adhere to tradition and conservative gender roles. But she had a life that she did love. She had a lover in London. She got into trouble. She had dreams. She had hopes. But of course, she had to give those up in order to raise a child that could maybe one day fulfill hopes of their own, a chance that she was not given. This is about family, love, the queer experience, the queer POC experience, racism. It literally has just about everything I love in a novel. It is a 4.5-star read for me because it is a wonderful novel, but Akash's character is obsessed with music. That I understand. It's totally fine. But he keeps on name dropping songs from the 90s to the point where you're like, okay, I get it. That was the decade for music. You do not like Taylor Swift and other pop stars that are out right now. That's totally fine. It was really repetitive and kind of got in the way of both the reading experience and the audiobook. Also, it was a little dragged on in sections. I think that a lot of criticisms I see of the novel are that it drags a bit. And I don't mind that because it really does feel like a character study in some sections, but I can see how someone would feel that way. Also, the narrator, Vikas Adam, oh my god, he was performing like rent was due. The voices he did for Renu, this brown mother who was struggling to keep her emotions at bay, to Akash, to Akash's brother, to the husband. I thought that there was a literal cast of narrators. It's one guy. It is so well done, and I almost give it 5 stars just for the narration alone. For the love of God, if you enjoy family pieces, family dramas, if you like reading about a Brown family, or just a story about an underdog that really just needs to get his shit together, you would love this book. Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died was and continues to be everywhere on every platform that you can think of. So being the memoir mistress that I am, I had to pick it up. There are countless reviews for this memoir on YouTube, so I don't want to be too repetitive or even go into it too much. I will just say that this is a very difficult and personal read into McCurdy's life as a child star and how fame can horribly affect your life at such a young age, especially if you were once living in poverty and now your whole family, specifically the mother you want to please so badly, depends on you. It centers around McCurdy's love for her mother and how deeply she wanted to impress and be loved by her, until she finally realizes the love that her mother had for her was not love at all. It was abuse, it was jealousy, it was her taking advantage of her daughter. What I do want to say though is that I never grew up watching iCarly. I was a kid who was strictly cartoons only because People's shows 1 bored me and 2 were too advanced for my small brain. But I was still very deeply moved by the memoir. So if you're thinking you don't like memoirs or you've never watched the show so you wouldn't really get into this particular novel, I think that you should give it a go. I think that you would still be moved by it. I would like to say that there is a lot of trigger warnings for this particular memoir. Sexual abuse, emotional abuse, eating disorders, alcoholism, anything that comes with being a child star, basically. The audiobook was phenomenal. McCurdy herself reads it, and you get to hear how emotional she is. I really admire her strength and her vulnerability and choice to put this out there. It is a 5-star read for me, of course. We're wrapping up the fiction with a historical gay romance, baby. A Gentleman Never Keeps Score by Cat Sebastian. I just found out that these are called Regency romances and not bodice busters or lordship liaisons. So there's that. Anyways, this is about a disgraced gentleman by the name of Hartley Sedgwick, who continues to be the hot goss of the London streets. Because of that, he keeps to himself in his inherited mansion and is sort of a recluse and doesn't really want to talk to anybody until one night he finds a mysterious man trying to invade his home. That man is Sam. Sam is a retired black boxer who now owns a grimy yet cozy pub outside of London. Sam is a really kind soul who helps people get on their feet or just offers them a warm meal. And in the novel, you find out that one of his best friends, Kate, posed for a naughty painting for some money when she was really down on her luck at a young age, and she really wants that painting destroyed for her conscience and so that she can get married without any fear. And so Sam decides to go look for the nudie painting in hopes of destroying it. That's when he comes across Hartley's place. Sam and Hartley meet bamboozled with one another until they finally have the romance neither of them saw coming. This was so good. This was so great. Cat Sebastian and KJ Charles know how to write a gay f***ing romance. Early on in the book, you understand that Hartley becomes a recluse for more than just the gossipy reasons, and that physical touch is something that's really hard for him to commit to. And Sam is so respectful of that fact. He never puts Hartley in a situation where he's uncomfortable or in pain. He always asks and never assumes. And on the flip side, Hartley understands, or gets to understand, Sam's struggles. He cannot just be out at night. He cannot do the same things Hartley does because he is a black man. He has so much writing on the line, and Hartley learns to understand that, wow, when you are black living in London, a knife is constantly being aimed at your back. Sam is the most tender and dreamy guy who's willing to fight for what he loves, and Hartley is this witty, undercover softie who just wants to finally be free of the past. Gorgeous. 4.5 stars only because it was a little too short for me, but that's one of KJ and Kat's flaws in the fact that they write these tidy little novels. But yeah, 4.5 stars. Also the smut, delicious, as it should be. All right, the daylight is leaving, the lights are coming on. Forgive me. On to manga and graphic novels. I finally read Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, book 1, and this book was really fun. I thought it was really cute. I do think it was a little overhyped, but I do think that it might be because I just started. It is book 1. It says that it's chapters 1 through 26 of the webtoon, so maybe I just haven't read enough to be really hooked by it quite yet. This is a Greek retelling of the myth of Hades and Persephone, and it's set up in this modern kind of magical, fantastical atmosphere and setting, and all the gods are there. Apollo, Hades, Zeus, Hera. What's unique about the story is that Smythe uses color to depict certain characters and express emotions in a specific way. Hades, for example, is blue because he's the god of death, but he's also very moody. And Persephone is pink because she's bright and she loves life, and she's also a little bit childish. Color here is really used in a unique and strong way, in a way I can only describe as like feelings paintball, but it works. I think it works really well. However, nothing super compelling has happened quite yet, and I think that's why the hype kind of had me feeling a little bit lost. But yeah, I think I just need to read a couple more of the volumes. So I also read the one-shot Mizuno and Chayama, a story about two girls who fall in love despite their families having very different political standings. Mizuno is a girl who's loved by all her classmates, and her father is running for mayor for the town. Chayama is the other girl who is very quiet and intensely bullied because her father is the current serving mayor of the town. It's also hinted that she's bullied because she comes from money, and her family owns like the biggest tea making company in the town or in the area. Chayama, like I said, is bullied intensely, and Mizuno just wants to get out of her boring town, and the two kind of see eye to eye. They shouldn't even be friends, but of course the girls meet one another and fall for each other and decide to keep this love a secret. This was really good. Nothing bad, but nothing moving. It was nice to read a Yuri that wasn't filled with tropey sexual elements. And if you ever played Yuri Bingo, I think you know what I'm talking about. What's really the best part of the manga is the fact that the girls aren't ashamed of loving each other because they're both girls. They're ashamed of loving each other because they're from different political families. They can't reveal each other because they might get the other in trouble. There also isn't any shock value homophobia, which is like a staple in Yuri manga for some reason. I did love the girls' interactions. I do feel that they were a little bit childish in some sections, despite it being a high school setting. Lastly, I read Ooku, The Inner Chambers by Fumi Yoshinaga. I read volumes 1 through 5, and this is easily one of the best manga I have ever read in a long time. This is a compelling historical drama that takes place in Edo, Japan, where a disease known as red pox seems to be terrorizing the country. The pox comes up suddenly and has no cure and only affects young men. It's a fatal, painful disease that completely tilts the gender population in Japan, leaving 1 man for every 5 women. This female-dominant society changes things, as you can guess. Women become the sole laborers, desperate to keep their economy and families afloat, and men become these expensive luxuries. Rich ones get to be hidden off and married off to produce children, and poor men are sent to pleasure districts just to make a quick buck and help women who are trying to get pregnant. With Japan traditionally being run by the shogunate, the shogun, or military head, tends to be male. But with the males dying at an alarming rate, the shogun now becomes historically female. We follow the several men and women who are trying to get accustomed to their new society and how war, politics, sex, and wealth are viewed through a matriarchal place. This series is impeccable. From the non-stop twist to the drama, it reads like a soap opera. We get to see how the men are living in constant fear of obtaining the red pox, of never being able to settle down and have a family, to not being able to have a son. Women are put under constant pressure as well, because not only do they have to do all the labor now, they still have to do all the homemaking at home. They are still cooking, they are still breastfeeding, they are still having children. Women become the new owners of familial practices and become positions of power that they once simply entertained. If you're interested in reading the series, I would just like to say that it is written in very traditional theatrical Japanese, so it reads in this kind of mishmash Shakespearean language. They use a lot of they and thous and wherefores. So that part you kind of get lost in, but you get kind of used to it like a couple chapters in, so that's fine. Second, there are elements in this series that are so intricate and historically founded that they just go right above my head. And I've seen critiques of that for other reviewers too, is that it's so founded on historical accuracy. The only thing that isn't accurate pretty much is the fact that there are women shogunate and women laborers and so on. It's just the gender switch that's not super accurate, but everything else is so deeply researched. The series was created by a Japanese history buff. I believe that was what her major is in, and it definitely reads like that at some points, so you can be bogged down a little bit by the stats my girl is spitting out every other chapter. But if you get beyond that, and that stuff is just part of the novel, you can really get to enjoy this wonderful matriarchal society and the highs and lows that it has, what it suffers from, what it lacks, what it excels in. If you like K-dramas, if you like historical dramas, if you want to see a women shogunate, you would love this. You would really love this. I personally cannot wait to continue the series. That is it for the August wrap-up. I highly doubt it is possible for me to best this particular month, especially now that school has finally really settled in and we're past the icebreakers and on to the actual essays. But I definitely still want to get some reading in. It's Hispanic Heritage Month, and I hope you are all reading Latino. I know I am. I hope you are staying cool. I hope you are doing your best to read as much as you can when you can, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!